11:55. Almost midnight. Enough time for one more story.
Welcome to my channel. My name is Nick, and whatever you're watching, I'm making videos about. This week's Shudder review calls for a low-key springtime favorite of mine, and that of course is John Carpenter's 1980 film The Fog. So gather around, come hither children, come sit around my spooky little campfire, cause I've got a ghost story for ya. Bolt your doors, lock your windows, there's something in the fog. Oh, it was just a bottle of bubbly, no big deal. The Fog is John Carpenter's ode to classic horror, in it the ghosts of shipwrecked sailors wreak havoc upon the residents of their town on its 100-year anniversary. Through a thick fog, they chart a murderous path of revenge. Most of us find ourselves watching this gem because it's John Carpenter's follow-up to the slasher classic Halloween, which ultimately leads a lot of us to never revisiting it again. And while this isn't the slasher that a lot of us maybe wanted it to be, The Fog aims to be a more traditional horror tale. We see a lot of 1950s nostalgia in 1980s horror because of the 30-year cycle, of course, and while a lot of the movies that followed this one aim to bring back the fun of the monster movies and alien movies of the 1950s, you can see this vibe in movies like Night of the Creeps and Creepshow. But The Fog is maybe one of the last of its kind, going for a more subtle, traditional, eerie, spooky kind of scary. This may just be my experience, but I found The Fog to become very rewatchable because it's a movie that I like to watch late at night, especially if I'm burning the midnight oil. If I'm working on a project or I'm writing and it's reaching midnight and I need to throw something on in the background, The Fog has become my go-to favorite. What makes this work so well for me on repeat viewings is the simple nature of the ghost story. The movie begins with an old man telling scary stories to a group of kids before midnight, and The Fog feels like a type of ghost story you would hear around a campfire, or maybe you would hear sailors telling each other late at night while drinking. And I think this can either work as a serious positive or a major negative, depending on what you want out of this movie. If you're looking for a more fleshed out story with character development and meaning, you probably won't be too satisfied with The Fog. But if you can get into the idea of a two-sentence ghost story stretched out to a 90-minute atmospheric if dated film with all of our favorite scream queens, well then you've come to the right place. Seriously, this movie is like the visual encapsulation of spooky. I have to say, I am going to fall in love with any movie filmed by Dean Cundey. Every time I watch a film shot by him, I chef's kiss the air because I love the damn Cundey frames. He is so good. He is by far my favorite director of photography, and his work definitely does not disappoint here. While the movie might look old, I think the visuals hold up and they still entertain me today, especially anytime we see Adrienne Barbeau at the lighthouse. I love it. And let's get a good look at these spooky sailor ghosts. I'm sorry, but this is perfect. This is a mood. This is how you do atmosphere. The way they linger in the darkness, they're so creepy. It's like, go back to Atlantis, you fuckers. After seeing one of my favorite title cards, we move into one of my favorite opening title sequences. While we see our cast and crew listed on screen, we hop around the small town of Antonio Bay as we see everything turned upside down. We've got alarms sounding, lights are going on and off, the machinery is going haywire, everything is all out of whack. It's such a good start to the film because it gives our characters something to immediately react to, and I also like the way that it shows us how our villains operate within this movie. I mean, sure, they are fueled by movie logic, they can pretty much do anything, and it does not make sense, but it's a lot of ghostly fun. They are blowing up driftwood, they're making glass burst. I mean, this fog straight up breaks shit, okay? It is the rudest damn fog in all of horror, I'm telling ya. With the ghost story told and our title sequence out of the way, we bounce around the town being introduced to our key players in the film, and then we get to our first kill. sails, and this really sets the tone and the mood of the film, which works so well for me. We're introduced to these sailors hanging out late at night at sea when they see the ghost ship of the Elizabeth Dane swoop past them, and the sailors pop up to slice them to pieces. While the violence in this movie is still low, I'm glad they did add what they did in post-production, so we at least have some stabbing sprinkled throughout, but I'll tell you, without the gore, it doesn't matter, because look at these sailors! Look at these spooky, spooky sailors! This is so good. This is atmosphere. I'm loving it. I'm loving the fog. One thing I always love to see, if it's done well, is an ensemble in a horror film. It's really easy to mess up, but again, when it's done well, as I think it is in The Fog, it's nice to be able to bounce around to different groups of people who are all dealing with the same overall conflict. And while I appreciate the individual characters in this movie, I also really enjoy seeing the way that the ghosts come after them in different ways. First, we have Tom Atkins as Nick Castle, and he's a fisherman or a sailor, or he's a boat dude, it doesn't really matter, but you know, so often whenever I go back to watch these old 80s movies, they have these just horrible male characters who are so macho, for lack of a better term. You know, kind of like Tom Atkins in Halloween 3, like that kind of guy. Can't fuck with it, sorry. But Nick is a great everyman character, and Atkins does a really good job filling out the role, and he's very easy to follow throughout the film. Everyone's favorite Scream Queen, Jamie Lee Curtis, solidifies that status with this film. She plays Elizabeth, a hitchhiker who hooks up with Nick and becomes entangled in the spooky happenings. And I like to think that Laurie Strode simply escaped Haddonfield, changed her name to Elizabeth, and became a more interesting character. But I do have to say, it's really nice to see Jamie Lee Curtis back in her day playing a character who isn't a high school student or a college student. She's just a woman out hitchhiking, having adventures, getting laid, and surviving ghost attacks.
I think I'll go to Vancouver now.
If we're gonna talk about The Fog, aside from the aesthetics, easily the best part of this film is Adrienne Barbeau as radio DJ Stevie Wayne. And not only is her performance entertaining, but let's just talk about how progressive this character was for 1980. Not only is she a single mother, but she's like single-handedly running this radio station. And I just have to say, I really appreciate, this is for 1980 standards, but she is a single mother, and there is not ever once a question of, where's the father? What happened to the man in her life? It doesn't matter. He simply doesn't matter. We see Stevie working hard and also being a loving mother, juggling the many aspects of her life as a very well-rounded and very human character.
Someone listen to me! My son is trapped! 887 White Beach Lane, my son is trapped by the fog! Andy, get out of the house! Run!
And when things get serious for Stevie, she rises to the occasion like the fierce lioness that she is. When the sailors attack the lighthouse, she climbs to the damn tippy top of that lighthouse to get away from them. And when they still show up and stab her in the damn shoulder with a hook, Stevie plucks that damn hook right out of her own shoulder and takes on Wormface with it. This is an underrated horror heroine moment, and for that, Stevie goes into my personal Hall of Fame. Also, she uses her platform like a pro, like bonus 10 points to you, Stevie.
To the ships at sea who can hear my voice, look across the water into the darkness. Look for the fog.
The Fog might be a tad sleepy, but that's part of its overall charm for me. The setting is great, the actors are selling it, and the spooky sailors straight out of a Scooby-Doo episode make me want to revisit it again and again. As for the concept, I'm gonna give The Fog a 3.5 out of 5 because I love the idea of these ghosts returning from the watery grave to haunt this seaside town. But I don't think that the story that Deborah Hill and John Carpenter cooked up really utilizes that setup as well as it could have. As for the execution, I'm going to give it a 2.5 out of 5 because even John Carpenter didn't think he had a very good film to work with once he finished filming it. But despite some poor pacing and wobbly structure, they cobbled together something in the edit that I think is a very rewatchable film. For entertainment value, I'm going to give it a 3 out of 5. While it doesn't have the most exciting sequences or the highest production value, I think at this point I've stated enough that The Fog is a favorite of mine. As for my personal grade, I'm gonna give The Fog a 3 out of 5. And it's too bad it never got a sequel or a remake. This is the only Fog that exists in history. It's too bad. What did you guys think of The Fog? Let me know in the comments and we'll continue the conversation there. Thank you so much for watching this video. I greatly appreciate it as always. You can follow me on Instagram and Letterboxd to see more of what I'm watching. That's it for this video, but I won't stop you from watching another.